I heard repeatedly that girls shouldn't become surgeons.
The people within the programs were not as diverse.
It was because we wanted change and because we wanted a voice at the table.
When I told some of our colleagues that we were doing this, that we needed a local women in otolaryngology group, one answer was, "Oh, are you going to just go get your nails done together?" And I said, okay, well, what does that mean? That's what friends do. Friends get their nails done together. And yes, it's good to be friends with powerful, smart women. Powerful, smart women. Powerful, smart women. Powerful, smart women.
I was one of the few women in otolaryngology when I finished my training program in 1971. And then I immediately joined the Army. I was the only woman at the evac hospital, to my knowledge, the only woman physician and a surgeon during the Vietnam War. I volunteered and went to Vietnam with my husband, Russ, and we were stationed there for 1 year. So it's a little bit of an unusual move after the residency. When I finished, I realized many years later that there were only 5 women that I knew of out of a field of 5,600 men practicing otolaryngology in that era. Many of them have either died or are incapacitated, so I'm representing this group of women now. None of us spoke anything about our professional careers. We were just friends. When I started back in academic medicine in the military, the group of women, and we were small, would sit at a breakfast table or a lunch table, and all of these men, big department heads throughout the country, would pass by and say, well, what do we have here? So by default, I'm speaking for all of them in this historical time, and I really appreciate the effort of the women in otolaryngology to document this for us.
I was the first woman in our residency program at Oregon, and I'm proud to say by the time I finished, there were 3 others behind me. We're very close friends. They knew they needed to diversify, but they weren't quite sure how to go about it.
When I started medical school, I had never met a woman surgeon, and in fact, all through my medical school class, I had never met a woman surgeon. And when I did general surgery, there was one woman who was a chief resident, and it was the first time I had ever met a woman who was a surgeon. And she was very talented, and she was highly respected, and although she was much higher in the training program than I was, just seeing her in that position gave me a lot of courage and a lot of optimism about the possibility that I could finish the program.
One of my residents said, well, he's never seen a woman surgeon. And I had one of the OR techs tell one of my colleagues, well, she's pretty good for a nurse. She seems to know a lot in the surgical procedures. It didn't faze me to make a big deal about it. I was amused more than anything to hear these comments.
There was no diversity when I started my residency at UCSD. My first day on the service, one of the residents said to me, "What are you doing here in an all-male program?" So that's how I started my first day. Of course, I was devastated, not only because I was going to be the first woman that UCSD ever had in their residency program, but I was from a different country, and so I was, needless to say, nervous, but decided, work hard and go about your business, and hopefully that'll show. And a few months later, this same chief resident, we were walking back from the VA cafeteria, and there was a puddle of water, and all of a sudden he lifts me up and carries me across this puddle of water and says, "I can't let my little Indian princess walk through this." So that's when I realized, all right, I was part of the group.
We were all white in the middle of Wisconsin. There was about 5 women out of 15. So for the time, actually, that was pretty diverse.
Our class had 6, which was very unusual, 6 out of 71, very unusual for the times. As a student, as an intern, as a resident, you had to excel in a male-dominated field, whether it was medicine or surgery.
We did have 1 female faculty member who also happened to be our 1 black faculty member, and it was actually fantastic to have her there because many programs didn't have somebody who represented either of those constituencies, and for me personally it was helpful to make life decisions because I had at least 1 person who could talk to me about those things.
When I started residency, our program was not very diverse. I was the first woman to get married during my residency and the second woman to have a child. By the time we finished residency though, things had started to change. At the time I finished, we had 1 African American, 1 Latino, and 1 LGBTQ resident in the ranks.
One time in otolaryngology as a resident, I was called to see a patient in the emergency room who was an alcoholic who had a nosebleed, and I took him in a wheelchair down the corridor, across the elevator to the ENT clinic to take care of him, and the lights went out. The electricity was turned off in the hospital because, in fact, they were building the children's hospital, and it was a planned occurrence, although I was unaware of it. So I quickly called the ER and said, "You've got to send somebody here. I'm here in the dark with this patient." And they said, "Well, where's your nurse?" And I said, "What nurse?" And it turns out that all along, the male residents have been taking a nurse with them out of the emergency room to the clinic. And I never knew that. And I was taking care of all of these things on my own.
I very distinctly remember my last rotation as a chief resident at the University Hospital being the first time ever there was an all-female team, because it was me and the 3 juniors were all women. And actually had t-shirts printed up about the Women in Otolaryngology kind of club, because it was so unique.
I had to fight to get equal pay, to get advancements.
It was challenging because as a female surgeon, I had to prove myself and my skills. And I thought as a woman going to a mostly male referral base, I had to be somewhat unique.
Unfortunately, I think the biases have gone from much more explicit to much more implicit.
You'd walk into the room even after I thought establishing a connection with the patient, and they still want to know who's doing the surgery, you know, and if I had a male resident with me, you know, they just assumed it was him. And sometimes they didn't correct the patient.
Why are you taking a seat from a man? My answer to why are you trying to take a seat from a man was, I'm not. He can take his own seat and I can take my seat, you know. It's never a zero-sum game.
My husband and son both think I should write a book, but not to spoil any upcoming books. There were so many examples, it's really hard to pick one. When I was in general surgery, there was an attending who used to call all the nurses Dearie, and he used to call me Dr. Dearie, and that was how he affectionately called me. One of the most common occurrences that persists today is that many times during meetings, I can make a comment or an insight or a suggestion, and there's maybe silence, even among leaders, and maybe 5 to 7 minutes later, a man will say the exact same suggestion, and they'll say, wow, that's such a great, you know, I think we could work on that.
I think I'm subject to a lot of implicit bias as a woman surgeon. Not so much from my colleagues and nurses, I don't feel that, but still from the patients. One of my favorite instances of this is I was seeing a very elderly man who was a cochlear implant candidate. He was there with his daughters, and at one point he looked at one of his daughters and said, "She's cute." And her daughter yelled back, because he's deaf, "Dad, she's gonna cut your head open." And so for me, I have to sort of show up as the person I want them to perceive. And that's how I overcome the bias. When I was a junior faculty, I would wear suits frequently to clinic. Now I believe I've earned enough gray hairs to not need that.
When you're the only woman, you're very conscious of everything that you do, and I think that it made me feel like I had a lot to prove, and I had to work harder, get there earlier, stay later, and even then I was always dealing with the prevalent myths about what women were allowed to do or should do in medicine. So when I was discussing these questions with my son, who is a really young, cool guy who is very aware of white male privilege, he was saying that it's really a burden to feel that you have to do twice as much to almost be considered equal, because you're doing twice as much and still not considered equal. When I was preparing for this interview, I got the questions and I put them away, and I didn't really want to look at them. And I really delayed thinking about them. I think I delayed because it was painful, and the way I dealt with these things all along the way, from training all the way into my career, is by developing a sense of humor, relying on my friends. I think everyone gets through hard times with a little help from their friends and their family. I kind of kept my head down, not really let myself feel all of the frustration that I could with some of these episodes.
Being in Honduras as a commander, I outranked everybody on post because I was senior in rank. A funny story is whenever I walked around with my chief nurse, she would make sure everybody saluted me, because whenever you saw a woman, you thought, well, they're going to be a lower rank, but she stopped them dead.
We proved ourselves more because we weren't just proving ourselves to men who didn't accept us, or for women of color, white men who didn't accept us. The nurses didn't accept us. There's a whole power dynamic. Who does she think she is? Was heard a lot. And the answer was, I think I'm the doctor and I think you're the nurse. And I think if we work together, we can take care of this patient.
We wanted each other to do well, and we understood that we were blessed to have this opportunity to work together without having to worry about anything else.
I was told more than once that I was the equal opportunity candidate, and it made me feel like they brought me in to check a box. I can tell you now, in my role as Executive Vice Dean for Academic Affairs, that I actually run and am responsible for chair search processes, and we have adopted best practices for faculty searches, which is to have a diverse search committee and to have all members of all search committees actually take unconscious or implicit bias training, just to make people aware of unconscious biases that all of us have.
It's not Dr. Amy Jones, it's Dr. Jones. It's not Dr. Cole Jones, it's Dr. Jones. In other words, you're not giving away anything that's going to prejudice, and just look at your quality. And it'll take time, and it'll take time, and it'll take time.
We need to show the Academy and the Foundation that women here mean business. We need an endowment. And it was the simplest thing.
Linda Brodsky was one of the people who was very involved at that time, and she was the one that was like, oh no, let's think bigger. There were a couple dozen of us that sort of came together at that time.
In this flurry of brainstorming, like the way you read about how Google was founded based on a cocktail napkin. We thought about all the ways we could do it. We thought about the captive audience we had for the next 4 days at the meeting. We'd say, as people were filing in, hey, do you want to donate to the endowment?
In 2010 in Boston, I was editor of the Academy Journal, Otolaryngology, Head and Neck Surgery, and I distinctly remember being approached by some women at the time saying, "How come you don't have more women on your editorial board, Dr. Rosenfeld?"
Where are your women? Where is your diversity? Where are you putting women so that they can thrive and that they feel welcome?
I remember looking through committees I could join and thinking, why don't we have a women's committee? And I actually wrote to the committee membership and said, is there a women's committee? And they said, oh yeah. So I just got put on that. And I was part of the Women in Oto. And then back when Dr. Chandrasekhar and Dr. Brodsky, who's now deceased, were part of the Women in Otolaryngology committee. So we sat down and worked together and wrote up all the bylaws and submitted, and we became the Women in Otolaryngology section.
That was a pretty magical time.
The Women in Otolaryngology went from a group of women desperately seeking each other out to have a cup of tea or coffee or have lunch at the academy to a committee, and then we wanted to make it a section, and that's a big process to create a section at the academy.
I had contacted Megan, who was the development person in the academy, a week or so before that and said I would like to donate a sum of money. It was a time that you could become a lifetime member in the Millennium Society by donating $25,000, and so I said, you know, let's do something, but I don't want it to just go into the general fund. I want to do something for women. A bunch of us started emailing right before the academy, and then that Friday night of the academy, people started getting together and excitement grew.
There was a lot of enthusiasm at the time when the first endowment came about because it was just such a novel concept and everyone was gung-ho. They couldn't believe that this was even happening.
We were about to become a section. We had an executive vice president who was very supportive of women. The president-elect of the academy was very supportive of women. It just felt like something different was happening. And we began to realize to really have a seat at the table and really get the academy's attention, we needed money. And so that's kind of how it all started. Once we found something that we were all really excited about and passionate about, you know, we raised $400,000 in 4 days. The Academy had never seen the likes of that.
It was raised with the joy of giving that you read about in books.
And it woke up a lot of the people in the Academy to, oh, this is a group that has something to say, that is passionate about something and wants to see change, to see change, to see change.
I was fortunate enough when I completed my fellowship to get involved with the Academy. I had the opportunity to start the Diversity and Inclusion Committee. It was an opportunity which I think was really transformative for me in being able to really bring some things to the forefront as far as our specialty, as far as diversity.
I have always been involved in the Academy, and I've always been, as soon as there was the lunch sessions, I've always been involved in the community that became a committee and then ultimately a section.
Part of my passion has been working in the arena of diversity. Being an African American woman, you get treated differently not only by the staff, but sometimes the support staff.
I actually ran into one of the extremely well-known rhinologists who had interviewed me, and he laughed at me and said that no general academic otolaryngologist would ever survive, that you needed a fellowship training and that I would be out of a job within a year or two. And I am a rather determined person. So I have persisted in academic otolaryngology just as a general otolaryngologist for the last 15 years. So I think I did okay.
I think as a woman, you're dealing with that tightrope that you're walking. You know, you're trying to be a good partner, you're trying to be an excellent physician, you want to still have a family life. So I think it's very hard, and I think that that's probably not going to change.
I think everybody's overcome biases regardless of gender, race, all those other pieces. There weren't a lot of women in otolaryngology when I started. It was 5% female when I applied.
Even the question is asked in the past tense, have you experienced? I think that we continue to experience it on a daily basis.
I continue to face it now. Pretty frequently, I will walk into the operating room and the room is not set up how I set it up. The room is set up how one of my male colleagues sets it up. And I could understand that for the first few times, but it's been 3.5 years, and I will still get like, oh, I'm sorry, that's how Dr. So-and-so sets up his cases.
I think like almost any woman walking through these halls, certainly of my generation, and probably the younger generation, we have all experienced opportunities, or not opportunities, situations in which things were not a level playing field. While ENT has certainly increased the number of women at the entry level, if you look at academic medicine, women are still very poorly represented in senior leadership positions.
I remember the first time I met Jennifer Derryberry being so excited that we had a female president, and listening to how she balanced life. Literally had a conversation one day about like the help she had at home so that she could do the work and actually take care of the kids.
I remember meeting the then president of the academy at a Board of Governors function, and he must have been 8 feet tall to my 5'4¼ and he leaned all the way over and he said, "Oh, so you're the little lady who applied to the most committees." And I said, I guess I am. And he asked me one of the best questions I've ever been asked. And he said to me, "Do you care particularly which committee, or do you just want to serve?" And I said the truth. I said, "I just want to serve."
I had a chance to work in many capacities with the women in Oto, and really have an opportunity to appreciate what so many of the women in our organization have to add, and the contributions that they've been able to make, and not only in inspiring others, but in telling their stories to encourage others that follow them.
If they would come to me, whatever little knowledge I had, they could have all of it.
Quite honestly, my time at the Academy has always been my home. The opportunity to contribute at the Academy and feel like I have family and friends when I come here. The staff I know pretty well. I mean, I walk in the door and feel like these are people that appreciate what I've done and that understand the contribution and that allow me to contribute in a way that I feel like I can substantially help the organization.
I don't know if I have a personal legacy. I would like to be known as a mentor more than being known as the first to do this or that. I'd rather be known as someone who has helped bring women along, someone who's available for direction and for mentorship and just to talk to.
I've really always had this interest in wanting to do research to see how we could make a difference.
I was fully indoctrinated into otolaryngology when I did my pediatrics rotation at the College Hospital of Albert Einstein. I was encouraged to go into otolaryngology by two twins, the Etra brothers, who raved about otolaryngology, and that was at the advent of the lasers.
Funny story, I applied to sleep and was told that they didn't have room on the sleep committee, so they put me on the Women in Otolaryngology committee. I came to some of the first meetings and became very involved with it and loved it.
The Academy has been helpful and even ahead of some of our other otolaryngology societies in recognizing the roles of women.
One of the issues that always comes up, even in my younger days, when I was told, well, we're not going to have you go to medical school because you're just going to get married and you're going to have a family.
I think men and women are challenged by work-life balance. Part of that is if people choose to have a family, that's one of the challenges, but I think the other challenges are having a life that's not 100% engulfed by work, taking care of one's self, having friends and a community outside of work, and also, aging parents, et cetera, et cetera.
I used to joke around that my first child cost $1,500 and my second child cost $45,000 because I didn't meet my RVU goal that year.
I think one of the more challenging parts of the career is trying to balance what you need for your own professional development against what the patient needs. And the patient's always my true north.
I became more involved when I realized that I had some needs that weren't being filled in other places. I needed to learn some negotiation skills. I needed to find my voice to advocate for myself and what I was doing academically and career-wise.
My legacy. Well, being the first woman president of the American Academy of Otolaryngology really, to me, is a legacy. It's something I'm humbled by having been able to do that. It meant a lot, still means a lot to me.
I think legacy sounds a bit lofty. That's a little great. But I feel like I've been very privileged with all of the people I've participated in the training. When I see past residents be so successful, that gives me great pride. When I think about the patients that I've helped, I'm very, very pleased. And I feel like my son is a really great legacy because he's turned out to be a very ethical and kind person. So these are things that I'm really proud of.
I'm still working on my legacy. I think some of it is outside of this place. It's my kids.
I'd like my legacy to be is that it was somewhat easier after I came. There's a great Brene Brown quote that I love, that at the end of this day, this week, or my life, that I've accomplished more than I complained about. So I try to live by that.
The biggest compliment I got when I was leaving Walter Reed was Pathfinder. You have to bring your people along. You have to show the path, but you have to bring them along. And if you don't do that, you lose them. So that moniker was one that I really value.
When I first started coming to these meetings in the early 80s, there were 25 women in a room and we each paid $25 to Kathy Uremchek, and she ordered a catered meal. And that was all there was of the WIO. We didn't even have a committee at that time. And it's grown from that to being a section. And I think it will continue to grow, but I don't think we need to be complacent about the fact that we're increasing in numbers, because I think there are still a lot of biases, some of them subtle, some of them not so subtle, that affect all of us. When I talk to a third-year resident and they say, oh, we're 50-50, it's all okay, just like, oh, you just don't realize all the little ways that they could discriminate against you pay-wise, and the way they work the salary formula if you're off for a pregnancy. There's just so many different ways that we still have plenty of issues to address.
There's an understanding that our workforce should reflect our population.
I think that's some of the unconscious bias we all have. I myself, when I ask people who their primary care doctor is, oftentimes act like it's going to be a guy, even though I'm a female physician. And so overcoming that's going to require knowledge that we have the unconscious bias and then consciously trying to overcome it.
When I look at the student populations and I see 50% of the classes are women, and I look, 50% of our population are women, 50% of our patients are women, I am quite sure that otolaryngologists in time will be 50% women.
The numbers of women participating in medical education are increasing.
Our medical school, this year's admitted class, has 2/3 women. Otolaryngology is a fabulous specialty for women and men, and so I think that I foresee the future to be increased numbers of women.
We need to be strong advocates and support them as they're making decisions for their career paths and allow them to consider otolaryngology amidst surgical subspecialty options. And so despite the challenges that we face, this is a great field to be in and a great time to be in it.
Right now, over half the medical students in the country are women. And we have 25–30% of our residents in the specialty are women now. I'm not going to be happy until that percentage is up 50% at the minimum. And also, if you look at surveys that are done and well-done studies, the average woman physician in all specialties, including surgical ones, for the same amount of work, same number of hours, makes 80% of what a male will. And again, until that discrepancy is done, we have a lot of work cut out for us.
I remember one time when I was a beginning attending, and I still didn't know any women in otolaryngology. I was walking down the hall and I saw 2 young residents speaking. They were both women. They were residents in pediatrics, and I looked at them and I thought, wow, what would it have been like to have a woman colleague? I mean, that it was the everydayness of them just sitting there talking to each other. I almost had difficulty imagining what it would have been like to have kind of a buddy who was another woman.
We had a guy that needed surgery on a weekend, and he did not want a woman to operate on him. Unfortunately, the woman on call the next day was a woman, and the woman on call the day after that was another woman, so, he eventually had to. They don't even think you're the doctor. You're the doctor. You're the doctor.
I expect that the challenges that women in otolaryngology may face is complacency. We have come a long way in how we're viewed, how we're represented, and in sheer number alone. However, I'm reminded of the parable of the elephant in the circus. And if you don't know this, there's a baby elephant, and he's tied to a stake in the circus. And that's what he's used to, is being tied to the stake. What happens over time is this baby elephant grows up and gets very big, and he's still tied to this tiny little stake. And so he's held in place by that stake. Even though he's strong enough to escape at any time, he represents that in his mind as a limit. And so I think we don't want to represent these internal limits to ourselves or get complacent that this is as far as we're coming or are going to come.
I think the women should all be investing in themselves. You're investing in your future. It's what your career is, it's what your life is. So invest in that to help your own career and to help those that are coming behind you. It's important for us to pave the way for those that follow us.
It's truly amazing how things have really evolved.
At the beginning, there were almost no women that I could find, and that made it kind of isolating and lonely. Now there are many more women. I think the presence of the WIO is astonishing.
Women need to support women, and I think we're all realizing that more and more, and there's a tremendous source of inspiration that comes from colleagues that can share their experiences.
Now that there are numbers, we have to work together to help each other. Something that has been shown over and over again is that women have to put women on panels. They have to help each other. They have to put each other as moderators on programs. They have to look to refer to each other. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity for women to show strength and leadership. And another thing is that I think women sometimes step back from leadership positions feeling that either they don't have the time or it's too much effort, but I feel that part of the changes have come from having women in leadership positions. So I would like to encourage women to embrace those challenges.
Find a mentor if you want to be a leader, and a sponsor who will nominate you for important roles, and a coach. There's now a community of women leaders that should continue to support leadership development for women and men. I actually really believe that mentorship, coaching, sponsorship, and leadership development really can cross gender lines.
There's no reason, no rhyme or reason or why we should get in each other's way, because one person does well, everybody does well. You go out and you make us proud.
It's a community effort, and I love hearing people's inspiring thoughts and ideas of how to tackle things like balance and advocacy and engagement and wellness. And so I think it's a journey, and I think ultimately we should all aspire to try to leave a positive legacy on the people we interact with. The best thing we can do is support each other and give people opportunities to get involved. And what that means for me is if I'm lucky enough to be giving a panel at a national meeting, I'm going to invite perhaps a resident or a junior faculty, a young physician, to be part of that so that they can be part of the academy as a whole. And the more involved they get, the more they will become our future.
The conversation, even in that word, the mantle, this is something that members of Academy leadership and the rank and file members of the Academy recognize, that there isn't a reason why there should be a group of people presenting, for example, that you have 6 men and no women. I can't legislate that, but I can, as a leader, I can recognize what that looks like, what that might feel like, and what opportunities are missed there to really get the most out of our members for our members.
If Sujana Sandrasekhar wants to get her nails done with me, that would be awesome, because I would learn a lot from her and it would be wonderful.
I hope that I have been able to serve as a role model to others and inspire other junior faculty learners and young people to enter our field and to continue to propel the specialty forward.
I think we're all pioneers and trailblazers in otolaryngology to a degree. I feel like I'm not the first to do a lot of these things, but I feel that our presence is not necessarily normalized yet. And so I try very hard to make sure that my presence feels very natural and very normal, and that I'm not there as a token part of the experience, but that my presence there is very justified.
I think mentorship and leadership are evolving concepts. I try very hard to be a good mentor, and I've looked, as my career has continued, in some different directions than typical academic otolaryngology, to reach out around me and find different people around me who have similar interests.
To me, that's the place where I think, in my small way, as I myself am a learner, am a little bit effective in helping encourage the conversation in a way that I hope people don't feel frozen out.
I have 2 daughters, and I worry about this for them. And we do bond over things like comic books and cartoons, and so we do watch anime together. And there is an anime called Black Clover where the central character is in a world where everybody has magic, but he has none. And the thing that he says throughout all his challenges is, my magic is never giving up. So that's sort of what I tell them, and that's kind of how I live my life. Like, he doesn't get upset. He is at times sad, but then he figures out a way to continue and progress. And so I sort of live that mantra. I say, my magic is never giving up, and I I may face some obstacles that might momentarily deter me, but I will persist in a positive manner. Like, nevertheless, she persisted.
I hope I'm a role model, particularly for my 13-year-old daughter. I'm hopeful, and I think we've accomplished a lot in the last decade. I don't think we've moved as far as we wanted to. And I worry that the climate of the world right now doesn't make this easier, makes it slightly harder. And I worry sometimes that I've not left as good a legacy for my daughter behind me.
The most rewarding aspects would be the chance that I got to work with and train residents. I really enjoyed being a program director. It was also one of the most challenging aspects because you have to not just deal with ACGME regulations, you also have to deal with residents. I also enjoyed being in academics, helping other women. If I was able to give a panel, I would make sure that I had other women on it. If I was doing a committee, I would make sure that there were other women who wanted to be on that committee too.
I feel very fortunate to now have my turn to mentor medical students, residents, faculty, and really a lot of head and neck surgeons in the country and be able to be of help, placing them on national committees, getting them involved in research. So that has been one of the most fun parts of my career, and especially being able to mentor women. You know, it is a little more challenging. Women have to balance their family and professional life.
Your family really has to be on board. If you are going to achieve a certain level of leadership, your family definitely has to be on board. It requires a great deal of time and energy.
First and foremost, get involved.
Probably one of the most important things is just having a vision.
I think any of the women of my generation, before my generation, and even after me, to stand up and be counted as a woman surgeon requires a little bit of oomph behind you.
We have to be daring and make some choices where we might be the first. We might be the first in the program, we might be the first to endeavor for fellowship in, you know, whatever that particular path is that we're taking, and we still need to go for it. We need to jump in with both feet and recognize that we're just as capable and just as able as any of our other counterparts.
I've tried to encourage other women to participate because they were all pretty much male-dominated entities when I was getting involved and then moving through into leadership positions.
Making a decision about how you want your career to end up, where you want to be in, say, 5, 10, 30 years is crucial, and everything should be aligned to that vision.
And when I mean sponsorship, I mean not just talking and helping someone get on a committee, but actually opening the door so they are being evaluated for bigger positions, and more people in those bigger positions will lead to more of us getting those positions.
It's the idea of raising your hand, leaning in, because oftentimes, even if you don't get the position, you network, people learn about you, and when something else comes up, then they'll turn to you so that they know that you have the skill set, you have the ability.
There's a common joke about how there's a father and a son that get into an accident and they go to the hospital and the doctor in the operating room says, I can't operate on this child, this is my son, and it's supposed to stump you. Like, I remember hearing it and being like, well, yeah, how could that be possible? Because that is in the accident too. And the joke is the doctor is his mother, a woman. And up until recently, you'd get that typical response where you'd be a little puzzled, how could it be? And then I asked my daughter and her friends, some male friends, I told this joke and they were like, duh, the doctor's his mom. It wasn't even, they didn't even consider it like a mind stump or anything like that. It was just so obvious. So that actually gave me a lot of hope.
The future of otolaryngology is bright for women now that we have these opportunities and we have people in position to encourage other physicians to increase our mentorship and our sponsorship.
I think that the future's bright. I think that the opportunities remain vast, that this is a subspecialty that affords us many opportunities for making relationships with our patients in ways that we might not see in some other surgical fields, while at the same time we can participate in research and we can involve ourselves in academy leadership and other things in a way that I don't think was available to us 10 or 20 years ago.
Things are better than they were 20 years ago, but we don't want that just to stay stagnant. We want that to keep growing, and I think that's our responsibility.
I think that there are some distinct challenges that Black females and underrepresented minority women particularly face, including the fact that there are just so few of us in the field.
It's really the individuality and the diversity that helps us be more innovative. So I think that's a big issue for the women.
By discouraging different voices, either from women or other underrepresented minorities, we really lose a lot of expertise and innovation and ability to make advances.
When we're going to apply for residency programs, or even when we're attempting to apply for medical school or fourth year out service rotations, we're not going to see a lot of people that look like us.
I mean, every study shows diversity makes a difference. Having more people involved make better decisions for it.
I think we've got to follow the Dan Rooney rule. The more women that finally get interviewed, the more likely then for them to be in leadership roles.
Change is possible.
When I look at where to go at the academy, I filter by the courses by women, and then you get this enriched selection of business and medicine courses, negotiation courses, career building, communication, conflict resolutions. Those are all things that are advocated for by the Women in Otolaryngology group.
Knowing your limitations is always good, because I think it's so important to ask for help. There are going to be projects or strategies that you really need to accomplish your goal, but you may not have the tools available within yourself to do that on your own. Once you identify what you want to do, making sure it's aligned with your company, your med group, your hospital, then I think you can move forward and be much more effective.
My children are growing up very differently than I did. I was the first person in my family to go to college, much less to medical school. But for my girls, seeing a woman doctor and having that is very normalized. Their mom's a doctor, so is their friend's mom, so is their other friend's mom. And so for them, that is a very normalized thing to be. And I expect that that's going to change how they view their career choices and any limitations that they may feel.
I know that otolaryngology is a very competitive residency, and I know that young people feel very disappointed if they don't get their first or their second choice in matching in residencies. But the truth is that what you learn in your residency is so much what you bring to it, your own attitude, and how you maximize your learning opportunities.
I take it as a personal responsibility that for young women who are wanting to be otolaryngologists or who are wanting to get more leadership opportunities, to make those connections, to make those introductions, to open that door so that they can actually be in the room to get that leadership position.
I think we keep bringing people along with us, picking up the people who for whatever reason may have fallen by the way, being that they're tired or just trying to fight, and being supportive of each other.
I think we have to take the opportunity we have right now where there's a lot of impetus and forward motion, and we have to keep it going. In the past, we've made our achievements and then we've been satisfied. I think people have to have that hunger to keep making more and more progress. We've made a little bit, but there's a lot more doors to be open and a lot more opportunities to be had.
We have to look at the population and say we should have more women in our workforce of otolaryngologists who are available and can not only treat our patients but be active in our organizations so that they inspire and encourage.
Try for the job you don't think you're quite qualified for. There's a lot of great data that men will put their hand up when they have 40% of the qualifications, and women are still reluctant at 90%. So stop worrying about whether you are the most qualified person in the room. Do whatever you have a passion for, and work with people you like.
Make sure you take credit, and that's just something that women don't do. They don't take credit for what they've done. They think everyone else is going to notice it. No. Raise your hand, take credit for what you do, and don't be afraid to be out there.
I get my gratification, my jollies from seeing somebody do a good job. You know, when one of our women became head of the Board of Overseers, wow, that was fun. Good, how nice. Did we able to help her? I hope so. That's where I get my gratification.
We are doing more. There's still a lot more to do, but compared to 1989 with my first Academy meeting, oh, it's so much better. It's a breath of fresh air.
As our numbers improve, our voice gets stronger.
If we could increase our endowment and perhaps change some of the bylaws and make it so that all of it's not fixed in an endowment, that it could be spent, then I think we could engage in more programs and just have a bigger reach. More women we can help, the more women we can reach, because we're a diverse group and we have different goals and different ideas, and we need to address all the different groups.
We will involve friendship, we will involve support, we will involve mentorship, sponsorship. I pull you up, you push me up, we help each other. We try to level this playing field that's not really level for women.
So your magic can be never giving up. So don't surrender and don't get too distressed. Of course, you'll be upset when things don't go your way, but don't let it get to you.
I would like women to feel proud, feel strong, and continue to work hard.
Keep trying, outshine me.
Hard work and just striving to do your best will ultimately change the way things are.
So knowing these relationships and watching them progress and the number of contributions they made is just amazing. And now, at this point in my 6th year, 3 of the 6 presidents while I've been in this job will be women. Gail Woodson, Sujana Chandrasekhar, and Carol Bradford. It's been amazing, all the contributions they've made, and I really would congratulate not only them but the whole WIO in this 10th year of existence. And thank you for all you do for us as otolaryngologists and the Academy as well.
So I have my final thoughts, and I gave them at graduation exercises for the residency class in 1993 when I was the Director of Interns at Walter Reed Army Medical Center. And I will read these because they are as pertinent today as they were in 1993. Teach by actively dialoguing with your colleagues and students. Treat them as equal partners in the desire to learn. Look at each case or situation with curiosity and a childlike wonder. Recognize an opportunity. This opportunity will challenge you to develop further. Develop consensus building techniques to reach your goals. Make time for your personal life rather than forever trying to increase your efficiency. Periodically examine your daily routine so as to recover some balance in your life. Reaffirm the goals you set to complement your intended lifestyle. Change your goals
as circumstances change. Allow yourself time to practice reflective thinking. This conscious practice will help you examine your current situation. It will help you see the other possibilities in your career and for your personal life.
Thank you.